Right, good afternoon everyone. I'm Syed Islam and I'm the Assessment Systems Manager at the AAT. As Barry mentioned earlier, I'll talk a little bit about computer-based projects and a year on how it's worked for AAT. What I'll do is just to give you an outline, just to talk about what computer-based projects mean for AAT, the main changes that we've introduced to support the delivery of computer-based projects within Surpass, and how they're being used by training providers and by us, the auditing body, and just a few bits of feedback from training providers and ourselves, again, internal staff using Surpass. So what are computer-based projects? For us, they are assessments that last over a number of days, actually a number of months, and they're internally marked assessments, meaning that the training providers are responsible for marking those and also doing some verification around those. We do have invigilated CBPs and we have non-invigilated CBPs. Again, the non-invigilated, they would be accessed typically via the web browser, so a student would access that from home via the web browser. So the main changes that we introduced about a year ago, and we're looking to introduce more changes over the next 12 months. The main changes that we introduced a year ago is the introduction of multi-day assessments. So traditionally we offered assessments that last one day or a number of hours, whereas now they're able to last, not quite sure what the upper limit is, but we have a 6-month project at level 4, as well as recognition of prior learning assessments, workplace evidence. One of the changes that we've introduced also is the ability to assign assessors and internal verifiers during the scheduling process. So when an exams officer is scheduling the assessment, they will be required, if scheduling a CBP, to select an assessor and an internal verifier for that particular assessment based on a list of assessors and IVs that have already been set up against that training provider for that particular qualification. And what that means is then when the assessment is actually taken, it would be presented to that assessor and that internal verifier only to do the marking and verification of those assessments. We've repurposed the assessing screen or the marking screen so that it's solely used now by our training providers to do the assessing. And we've done the same for the marking screen or the moderation screen, as some of you may know it, and for the internal verifiers to do some verification and some sampling around that, and then to be able to release results from there. I think one of the other changes that we've introduced, which has proved really useful, is the introduction of automatic reports that are sent out to users that are training providers via Surpass Analytics. So these will be subscribed reports that we would subscribe users to receive on a periodic basis. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So how they're being used? Typically for our project-based assessments, RPL and WPE, whereby students will upload evidence, essays, so on, into Surpass using the file attached question. They'd also typically download a case study in a Word document or whatever it may be. We don't have any restriction on, or we don't put in place any restriction in terms of what type of file extension they can upload. So that might be a Word document, it may be audio file or video file. One of the changes that we'll be looking to introduce in the future is currently the student would upload their final submission to the training provider for them to be able to mark and verify the assessment, whereas what we'd likely be able to do is to accommodate online the multiple submission element of these assessments, the to and from the feedback from the tutor back to the student, all via Surpass, where that feedback is recorded and documented. So that's what we're working towards, and hopefully in the next 12 months or so that will be in place. But until then, that is handled offline between the student and the training provider, that multiple submission or that feedback process, and then purely they would upload their final submission into Surpass for assessing. I mentioned that the assessments are assessed and verified within Surpass, so the marker or assessor at the training provider will do the marking within the marking screen and then submit that to the internal verifier, who would then review the marking, the candidate's response. If they agree, they will release the result. If they don't agree with the mark or the outcome, then they would provide some feedback to the assessor and return that script back to the assessor. It would go back from the internal verification screen back to the assessor so that they can review the excuse me, so that they can review the IV's comments and then remark that for submission again to the internal verifier. And that can happen however many times until the internal verifier is satisfied with the actual outcome, and then they would release that result. So how we mark our assessments then is we've now used SecureMarker to do the marking for all of the externally marked assessments. SecureMarker, again, for those of you that are not aware, we found it to be, it's definitely improved our quality assurance, the standardization around marking, and it's helped us to increase the turnaround time of releasing human marked assessment results back to students and training providers. So we've been able to do that far quicker than we were previously able to on Secure Assess. And that's been a massive benefit for us inadvertently through the adoption of computer-based projects. I mentioned about subscription reports. So we assign to all of our assessors and internal verifiers reports that they would receive on a weekly basis, which inform them of any assessments that are yet to be marked or yet to be verified. So rather than them having to constantly log into the system to see is there anything going in my marking, they would get a subscription report which would tell them that. It will be a CSV or an Excel file which will give them that information. And again, that we've decided on a weekly basis, but that can be a daily basis, it can be a monthly basis, and that will just go out. And there are a number of other reports that we've commissioned that we use not only for assessors and internal verifiers, but also for invigilators, for instance. So one of the challenges that we face is, and I'm sure many of you face, is students completing their work, but the assessment not being uploaded. We're able to extract invigilation reports which will show particular states of assessment, so those awaiting upload, and then proactively subscribe the exams officers to those reports so that they're aware of anything that's awaiting to be pushed through the system. That's one less kind of query or type of query we're having to deal with because the reports are doing that for us. So a year on, I think training providers and students like the fact that all of our assessments are hosted on a single platform, especially from a familiarization point of view, from a support point of view, and a training point of view. You'd appreciate that training providers would offer assessments for a number of awarding bodies, and having multiple platforms for single awarding bodies, that obviously isn't brilliant. So that's a really positive bit of feedback that we've had, in that they're happy, they like the fact that consistency in terms of the presentation of assessments and taking assessments, it's there for the different types of assessments that we offer. For the delivery of our projects, we used a Moodle-based platform, which, from an integration point of view, presented us with a few challenges. So Surpass, with the integration in place, we've got that connected, joined up system, Surpass, the assessment platform, and our own internal system, so that we can track at every stage where assessments are, that they've been scheduled, and exactly where they are in that cycle. And especially with, for the training providers, it's greatly helped because all of the assessment management that exists within Surpass around the auto-submit, the grace periods and all of that, it helps them, because if a student hasn't submitted the work, the system will do that on their behalf. So there's less admin on the training provider side, and that's been really, really noticeable. And the last point I'll mention is around the automated feedback. So in delivering the computer-based projects through Surpass, we're now able to provide feedback against each learning outcome within an assessment. And we would typically do that through kind of ratings, whether they've exceeded, they've met, they've been borderline significantly below, and one other which I can't quite remember right now. But that's allowed the training providers, some training providers, to not have to provide their own manual feedback, because the system is doing that already for them. Again, that's greatly helped a lot of training providers. Some still wish to top up that feedback by providing that personalized individual feedback, whereas others, they're satisfied with the feedback that the student receives from within the system. And like I say, that's been a really positive thing for us. And the fact that we can make available, previously we weren't able to make available sample assessments for the projects because of the platform that we were operating on, whereas on Surpass we can make available sample assessments for computer-based projects via our website with SCORMed packages, or again through Surpass as assessments that the training provider would schedule. Providing feedback on those sample assessments and giving training providers the opportunity, assessors and internal verifiers, to provide feedback on sample assessments if they wish to do so. So that's pretty much it. That's a really quick overview of what we've done and a little bit of a flavour for where we're hoping to go in the next 12 months or so as we develop that functionality even further. Okay, thank you.